Hello, folks. Nice to see you all again, and welcome to a slightly different video today. We're not going to be discussing any news or current events, or at least we're not intending to. It may come up at some point. Today, I'm going to be chatting to Election Maps UK for what I believe is, and maybe you can tell me this, Election Maps, is this your first interview regarding what you do? Ooh, a Captain Swiss exclusive. I'm quite pleased about that. So for anyone who isn't aware, Election Maps UK, you run a Twitter account. Where you go about taking various polling data, various demographic data, and as the name suggests, you make election maps.
I do.
And how old are you, may I ask?
17.
Now, 17. Now, what I and maybe a few viewers would be interested in, how does a fine young 17-year-old man like yourself get into the business of making election maps? It's arguably something of a niche hobby.
It definitely is. I mean, it's probably not what I should be saying, but I'm not even that fussed about maps really. I set up a Twitter account called Politistats UK in January 2018, I think, and all I did really there was kind of look at polls, kind of do election predictions, that sort of thing. And then in about, I think it was June of 2018, the previous owner of Election Maps UK messaged me and was like, he's moving to Australia and he hasn't really got much time on his hands anymore. So would you like to take over the account? And I was like, that'd be cool, because the account had about 12,000 followers at the time and I had about 3,000, I think. So
originally you basically managed to inherit a much larger Twitter page.
Yeah.
However, credit probably ought to be given, because I think you just said when you took over, it had about 12,000 followers. I had a look just before the interview. I think you've got about 44,000 now.
Yeah, that's right.
There we go. So you've grown it quite a bit under your own steam then, haven't you?
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I know this is completely off topic. I think the only time I've had something like that happen to me is a number of years ago, back when Shrek was still a popular meme on the internet for whatever reason. Someone turned over a Facebook page to me called the Church of Shrek. I ran that for a couple of years, but anyway, sorry. So what's happening with who used to run election maps now? Are they no longer taking part in that sort of thing on Twitter anymore?
They still have a Twitter account called #impartiality. They kind of pop up now and again, but they kind of got a family and stuff, and they live in Australia, so it does take a lot of time, and they don't really have all that time anymore. So.
And I've seen some of the maps that you've put together, and you're certainly more talented than I am in Microsoft Paint. Probably a bit more sophisticated than what I put together. How long does it generally take to do? Because I remember the local elections came along, and you set yourself the goal of making a map for everywhere. And I mean, are you still doing that now, or have you got it all finished?
I'm still only about a third of the way through the local election maps. I can't remember how many there was, 400 odd.
So say if you're doing a map for a single council area and you're filling in all of the wards, how long does that generally take you just for one council?
Typically maybe half an hour, but it depends on the council, because some on the website, they've already made a map for you, whereas some, it's separate PDF documents for every single ward, and it can literally take over an hour to do a single council.
Wow. So have you got a goal in mind of when you're expecting to get the local elections ones finished then?
Before the local elections.
kind of sort of a Captain Swiss, when are the Milky's going to come out sort of situation.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
This is the biggest, because it's in a 4-year cycle, and this is the biggest one by far. So after this year, it should be a bit easier.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly has been. I mean, we've been getting all sorts of extra votes and elections and all that across the place the last few years as well. Now, there's probably a few people on Twitter, if they're not familiar with you, but they follow their politics, they probably do follow accounts such as Britain Elect, who tend to tweet out the latest polls and numbers. And I know that that's something that you do as well.
Yeah.
Do you and Britain Elects or other Twitter users for that matter, because I know there's quite a few who deal with polls and maps, do you guys have a group chat? Do you talk to each other at all?
No, not really. I've talked to an account called Poll Maps Info UK a decent amount, but I don't really speak to anyone really.
I think in my own head I was imagining some kind of like a little exclusive club, a little bit like the Bullet Club, but just all people who do maps and polls and that sort of thing.
It's not like I don't like anyone, but it's just
No, because it's always a tweet when a treat when I see you guys interacting on Twitter with each other. Right, so we've done the local elections. I know that we've got a. Oh no, we should talk about the European elections very briefly because I think you put together a prediction that was fairly spot on, wasn't it?
Yeah. So it was over because obviously the election was on the Thursday. We didn't get the results till the Sunday night. I think it was like on the Saturday. I started hearing a few rumours like, "Oh my God, the Lib Dems might have come first or second in this council," when they weren't expected to. And I was like, "Oh God, maybe this is going to be a shock result." So I kind of had a guess at some numbers based on what I'd been hearing and plugged them into a calculator that I had on Excel and just kind of posted the numbers from that. And it turned out to be like perfectly accurate, apart from I had one less SNP seat and one more Tory seat, but everything else was, spot on.
Wow. And how much and how much are they paying the big pollsters who go around and do all this sort of thing?
Like £3,000 a poll, I think it costs.
Oh, I mean, one of my claims to fame was prior to the 2017 election. I made like a revised prediction for the seats like the day before the vote happened, and I was fairly close. I was off on a few of the parties, but like the big ones and the fact it was a hung parliament, I was fairly close. But for you to only be like, what was it, one seat off with the SNP?
Yeah.
And apart from that, you called everything else right.
Pretty much.
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. I'm impressed. Right. The other thing that I wanted to say, Twitter can obviously be a fun place when it comes to interacting with other people and members of the public. Not least we know because people can be very tribal when it comes to their politics. Now, in your position as Election Maps UK, I know that you hashtag impartiality. You do your very best to sort of rise above it, and you try and stick to just talking about the polls and the demographics, and not so much making a comment on the politics, right? But obviously, I imagine it's somewhat different for some of your followers. Do you ever get any kind of shtick off of people, or do people have issues with what you're reporting on? I'm just thinking along the lines of how certain people have like misforgivings about whether it's pollsters in general or certain Labour supporters as far as YouGov goes, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you ever get any interesting pushback from people on Twitter?
Literally all the time, 24/7. Like, I wouldn't ever recommend anyone to try and be impartial on Twitter because most of the time you just want to stab yourself in the eyes. I mean,
and is it from all sides? Is it just all of them complaining that it's biased against them in one way or another?
No particular group. You see like people getting angry about YouGov being inaccurate, people getting angry about the SNP not being included, people saying, "Oh, you're only posting this poll because you think this, you're only posting this poll because you think that," and you can't do anything right. But
as far as you go, you do make your best efforts to try and report on all the polls equally. You wouldn't, for example, cherry pick certain ones and deliberately leave other ones off, or anything along those lines.
Never intentionally. There might be some subconscious thing that's trying to tell me, but no, I always try and post anything that looks interesting, or I post every single Westminster poll that's done anyway.
And I understand that, going back to some of the maps and the graphs that you make, at least, I understand that some of these have been picked up and used by some of the national television media in this country.
Yeah, I've been on. So when it was Theresa May's trying to get a Brexit deal through, I did a spreadsheet about trying to predict how MPs would vote, and that was featured on Peston a couple of times, which is pretty crazy.
And did they credit you?
Yeah, they did.
Oh, good.
I've even got a little badge from them. That was very exciting.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. I imagine that being on Peston, you probably gained a few followers from that then.
Yeah, and I got a little Geek of the Week badge through the post.
You just wait until the absolute flood that comes in after this one. You might get tens of new followers. You never know. And has it just been Peston, or has there been anyone else thus far?
Adam Bolton from Skies. I know he's read out a couple of tweets on Sky News before. I think that's about it.
Now, I'm not going to ask you about your personal politics, because obviously that would be inappropriate with you being here in your capacity as election maps. But I'm more interested just in general. When did you find yourself getting interested in politics and things like polling? When did you first start taking notice of it all?
I don't know. My first probably memory is probably the 2010 election, and like just seeing like I remember looking on the BBC website and they had the little line graph of like the poll of polls. You could see all the parties getting closer and further from each other. But then I only really got interested in politics probably beginning of 2017, maybe, kind of after Brexit had happened and it all started going a bit crazy.
Oh, so fairly recently then?
Yeah, pretty recently.
Well, then again, I sometimes forget that you're a bit younger than me. Most of the people I know for all this, I always assume everyone's the same age because it's just the easiest way to go off it. But I mean, thinking about it, I find it hard to imagine having the concentration or the dedication for me to be making all that sort of stuff back when I was 15 or so.
Quite often I have to look on Wikipedia because people give references to like things that happened in politics in the 80s and 90s, and I don't even have a clue what they are. I have to kind of teach myself what happened.
And are you in college now?
Yeah.
And are you studying anything politics related?
I do economics, but I don't do politics itself.
I see. And are you thinking about going into anything in this kind of a field in the future, either just through continuing on with Twitter or maybe branching out into something else? Do you see yourself carrying on in this kind of a field for a while?
I don't think so, really. Like, it's more of a hobby. Like, I don't think I'd ever want to get into politics as a career because whatever you do, half the country I was going to despise you. So,
oh God, tell me about it. I mean, you very specifically tend to do your polls and demographics and the like. I do the YouTube channel for political commentary.
Yeah.
But probably the one thing that we've both observed gazing in is you just think to yourself, oh, you're feeding yourself to the bloody lion pit if you go and put yourself in for all of that. No, not to say I wouldn't ever do it at some point, but I at least think, well, I don't need that kind of stress when I'm this young. I need to have fun, I need to have fun for a bit first. Okay, and finally, I suppose, well, I think I've already asked you in part what your plans for the future were, but for the time being, at least, I assume you're continuing on with election maps. You've got no plan to end that anytime soon?
No, not planning to. I mean, obviously, I've got A-levels next summer, so there'll probably be a lot less. I have as much time to run it, but yeah, I don't plan to stop it anytime soon.
And if people are a fan of what you do on Twitter, you've recently started a Patreon where they can support you as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. So yeah, and there's rewards on that. So giving certain amounts, you can get like custom council maps and stuff. So.
Oh, I remember because I pledge $1 a month and I get a shout out every now and then. Captain Twit's like, oh, it's good, it's good. Right then, folks, I think that was probably going to be it. It was just a fairly short interview. I've really been hoping to get election maps on the channel for some time, just to ask them a little bit about what they do. If you're on Twitter but you're not currently following them, I do strongly recommend. I think the amount of effort that you put into your graphics and just generally the amount of effort you put into all of what you do on Twitter, it's quite admirable. And I hope you don't think that I mean this in a condescending way whatsoever, but it's admirable, I think, given your age as well. Just because, as I say, I really could not imagine myself doing this sort of thing when I was 17.
Thank you.
No problem. Right, fantastic. Well, that's it. I'll put a link to your Twitter account and the Patreon in the description of this video, so people can go check them out themselves if you want. Any last things to say before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
Go vote in those elections.
Yeah.
Democracy.
Go and vote.
And all that. Oh, one last thing I wanted to ask you. Do you have a position on the voting system in this country? Because I know at the moment we've got first past the post. Other alternatives are out there like proportional representation. Is it moving too far outside of your impartiality to be able to comment on that?
This is the one thing I let myself have a free pass on. That first past the post is clearly pretty atrocious, and it's like, especially with how crazy polling is at the moment, with kind of all four parties at 20%, give or take like 5%. That it's just the next election. It'll be exciting because we're not going to know what's going to happen until probably the results start coming in. But because it's also close, it's probably not going to be very democratic. I mean, just because party's going to get the same amount of votes, they're probably not going to get anywhere near the same amount of seats. So.
Right, and final question, I promise. Who's going to win the next election?
I don't think anyone's going to win a majority, and I don't think anyone will for a while. I'd say Labour, largest party, maybe on a similar amount of seats they have now, and will probably end up with some kind of coalition with either the SNP or the Lib Dems, or even both, propping up that government in return for either campaigning for Remain in a second referendum or a second Scottish independence referendum.
See, I think the only answer I can give at the moment that I'm brave enough for is just to say I think it'll be another hung parliament, and that's that's probably it for the time being, isn't it? Right. Anyway, Smashing, thank you very much for joining me, mate. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Right, folks. Catch you all later on.
Bye.